I'd like to welcome you to the Wednesday, September 2nd, 2009 Platting Board meeting. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Benjamin Roll.
Here.
Anastasia Taylor. Here. Art Clark.
Here.
Ellen McKay. Here. Michael Krieger.
Here.
Jody Moses. Here. Kathleen Plunkett. Ooh, that's Carol Stolpe. Here. Lendl Story.
Okay, we have a quorum. First order of business is to advise everyone on the board in the audience that there have been 2 postponements. Item D in the consent agenda, number 4, items A and B. S11730-3 Lake Otis and Tudor subdivision for both of them, and they've been postponed to October the 7th meeting. So that leaves the first order of business as being the approval of action summaries. There are action summaries for Monday, August the 3rd, 2009, Wednesday, August the 5th, 2009, and Wednesday, June the 3rd, 2009. And I just want to mention that I will be abstaining from the Wednesday, June the 3rd item because I was not in attendance. May I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Clark, and second, Ms. Taylor. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the action summaries are approved. There are no minutes. Under special order of business, are there any disclosures for this evening's meeting? Seeing none, we move to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have a time extension and a postponement for Lambert subdivision and correction to a staff report for Conway Rushton subdivision, which is that was heard on June the 3rd, and I will be abstaining from that item as well. The consent agenda consists of all matters before the board that do not require a public hearing. All items shall be approved by motion without debate. Does any board member wish to remove any item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, may I have a positive motion for the consent agenda? Mr. Krieger and Ms. Taylor seconds. Are there any objections?
Madam Chair, will the record reflect that A and B have been taken off the consent agenda then as somehow postponed?
Correct.
Okay.
Any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. And that moves us to old business. There is no old business. And then to new business. And the first case is S11650-2. This is the public hearing portion of the agenda. And during the public hearings, we will follow the procedure that's printed on the front of the agenda, and that is that after a staff presentation is completed on the items, I will ask for public testimony. Persons who wish to testify follow time limits established by the Platting Board Rules of Procedure. The petitioner, including all persons representing the petitioner, has 10 minutes. And of that time, a portion of it may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups such as community councils and PTAs have 5 minutes, and individual have 3 minutes. And we keep time by this little machine up here at the front, and it's green until you have 1 minute left. It turns yellow, and then at your time limit, it will be red, and you need to sum up if you haven't already. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board, but unless you are asked questions, or you may only testify once on any issue. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to an action that we take, and the procedure on appeals is outlined on the front of the agenda. So, the first and only case, S11650-2, Holton Hills subdivision. May we have the staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a 488-acre plot that creates 40 lots and 7 tracts. There is a request to vacate a 100-foot north-south section line easement that is common to sections 8 and 9. There was a request to vacate a 100-foot east-west section line easement common to sections 4 and 9, but that has been withdrawn by the petitioner. This site is impacted by streams, wetlands, floodplain, and it has variable and steep topography. Tiny Creek crosses the north portion of the petition area, and Glacier Creek runs adjacent to and partially within the southern portion of the petition area. Of the 5 tracts, Tract D contains 355 acres, which is approximately 75% of the entire area. It is not proposed for any development with this plot. It is subject to a number of zoning districts that include the GR3, single-family and two-family residential, GR5, multifamily residential, and Girdwood Open Space, GOS, as well as the New Base Resort, Recreation Reserve, and Development Recreation Districts. But as mentioned, there is no development proposed within Tract D. Tracts A, B1, C, and 9A are generally zoned for open space, GOS, Girdwood Open Space, due to the presence of wetlands, creeks, and steep slopes. Again, there is no development proposed within those tracts. Tracts B and C are proposed to be developed for off-street parking, and basically the area that is proposed for development is zoned for GR3 for single and two-family residential development. The wetlands, which are identified on the preliminary plat, are categorized as both A and B wetlands, which have the highest and value. The B wetlands were previously considered conservation wetlands. Type A were previously called preservation, but they're the higher value wetlands. And the Wetlands Management Plan does identify some management strategies. One of them is to resolve the need for additional delineation. That would be with the Municipal Wetlands Coordinator, and it's addressed as a condition on the plat. A note needs to be placed on the plat as well that prior to any disturbance within these wetlands, a permit is required from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The plat shows that there's a 25-foot setback, 12.5 feet either side of Tiny Creek. Actually, a 25-foot setback is required on each side of Tiny Creek, and that also is addressed in a plat note. Portions of the property are affected by floodplain, which requires a note on the plat, which is addressed in the conditions. Flood hazard review did state that a flood hazard permit would be required for construction of the road improvements within the public use easement that is proposed to extend from Hightower Road through the elementary school site. In terms of density, the net density of the 40 lots is about 2.45 dwelling units per acre. That does conform to the Girdwood Area Plan and also the Crow Creek Neighborhood Plan, which limits the number of dwelling units and/or lots to 40. So these would be 40 single-family dwelling unit lots. The Girdwood design standards contained in AMC 2109 are quite specific, more so than other zoning districts, but a minimum 8,400 square foot lot is required if lot is served by public sewer. The lots will be served by all public utilities, but the proposed lot sizes range from 12,980 square feet up to 28,750 square feet. Now, the dimensions for the required setbacks do differ. Unlike other zoning districts, they differ depending on the lot size. And these lot sizes fall within the requirement for each size of dimension, yard setback dimensions. No lot shall have an average slope greater than 35%. There was a preliminary review of some of the lots that appeared to have the greatest change in elevation, and those lots were had estimated slopes ranging from about 16 to 30%. Also, access easements are being proposed with some of the lots for access to lots. Traffic engineering has provided plat notes governing access to lots within the subdivision. The Girdwood regs also require that 30% of each lot be retained with natural vegetation, and that the permeable area, which includes the 30% natural vegetation of each lot, shall be 50%. It is recommended that a yard determination be obtained because the front yard, one of the criteria for determining which is the front yard is from the yard from which the driveway access is to be taken. So if you have a lot that fronts onto a major road, the main interior unnamed road, but it has access to the to a access easement, the front yard is not necessarily going to be along that main road. It would be, the front yard would be from the point from which the access is taken. That can have that makes a difference when determining where the building site is to be located, as well as taking into consideration the slopes and the retention of natural vegetation. Due to the very specific standards that are set forth in the plans and the 2109, the Girdwood land use regulations, it's one of the conditions is to bring a revised plat back to the board that would show the topography, the required yard setbacks, the building footprint, the driveway access, the 30% natural vegetation to be retained for review by the board to determine that the lots can be developed in accordance with the Girdwood design standards. This is an unusual requirement granted, but once the lots are platted and when they're sold, the property owner can basically build how that future owner wants to build. And it has occurred in other subdivisions. Lots are clear cut. That would be clearly a violation of the Girdwood regulations. So the reasoning behind having this, what is essentially a proposed site plan, is to guide the development during the building permit process to ensure that plot plans and proposed dwellings will be located in conformance with the Girdwood regulations, particularly in terms of where the yard setbacks are, what the dimensions of the yard setbacks are, because there will be two different sets of setbacks depending on the lot size. Access to this subdivision will be from Hightower Road via a public use easement that is to be acquired within the elementary school site. The elementary school site is not a part of this plat. It is not being dedicated with this plat, but it is a means of providing connection to the petition site. And from the western boundary of the petition site, a 60-foot wide right-of-way is shown being dedicated that extends to Crow Creek Road. And traffic engineering has stated that that 60-foot width is adequate and meets the local residential street standards, and those were copied into the packet. And that street standard does come from the AMC 2109, the Girdwood Land Use Regulations, that does require a walkway on one side, as well as drainage ditches and buffering. Traffic engineering also stated in their comments, however, that should be aware in the construction of the road that slope easements due to the topography of the property may be required, so that would have to be taken into consideration. There is also a 200-foot public easement along Glacier Creek. This was in the original federal patent, which was passed to the state when lands were transferred to the state. That same requirement was carried forward when the state transferred these lands to the municipality of Anchorage. And the preliminary plat does show the line for that 200-foot public easement. It does impact a couple of the lots. The petitioner has submitted an application to the Department of Natural Resources to amend that 200-foot public easement, and that has been done in other instances along Glacier Creeks, particularly for the installation of water lines that are installed by AWWU. AWWU is going to be constructing a water line next summer that will be extending from the Girdwood Airport through this subdivision and connecting to the water system on the Girdwood Elementary School site. Another issue for which we have received a number of comments from the public is the Iditarod Trail, the National Historic Iditarod Trail. Now, the preliminary plat does show the approximate location of that Iditarod Trail on the plat. The trail does cross a number of lots and tracts within the proposed subdivision. However, the trail was constructed without the knowledge of the Heritage Land Bank, which is the property owner. To reconcile this, the petition does intend to relocate and construct those portions of the existing Iditarod Trail that impacts lots within the subdivision. They are going to relocate it outside the boundaries of the platted lots and tracts. There has been a Girdwood Iditarod Trail route study, and there has been concern regarding the width of the Iditarod Trail and the easement for it. Now, the study does recommend a 6-foot wide trail with 2-foot cleared shoulders on either side. The study further states, and excerpts from the study were included in the packet, that the width of a trail easement is at the discretion of the appropriate public land manager or private landowner and can vary according to the property owner's needs. As mentioned, the subdivision will be served by all utilities. There is an existing T&E easement that crosses several lots, about 3 lots in Block 1. If there are no facilities located within that easement, it's recommended that that easement be vacated, but it was not part of the vacation request before the board tonight, and so cannot be acted upon tonight because it wasn't advertised. The petitioner is also requesting a 60-month approval for the development, which is expected to occur in 5 phases. Based on that, the foregoing, the department does recommend approval of the vacation of the 100-foot section line easements because an alternate access is being dedicated with this plat, does recommend approval of the phase plan, and does recommend approval of the plat for 60 months, subject to conditions that are found on pages 17 through 21 of the packet. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bryan. Are there any questions of staff?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Krieger.
a couple questions for staff. Ms. O'Brien, I'm looking at one of these plats. I can't see where the Iditarod Trail is shown on there. Could you show me where I'm supposed to be looking to find that?
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, looking at page 2 of the preliminary plat,
I think that's what I got.
it says sheet 2 of 2
Yeah.
at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, if you go to the extreme far right of the plat, about 2/3 of the way down, you see a dashed line with an arrow that says the approximate location of the existing Iditarod Trail.
Thank you. Another question? On the vacation of this section, how has the petitioner carried its burden to show that this section line isn't, this easement isn't of value to the municipality?
Excuse me. Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, not pretending to speak for the petitioner, but staff, when reviewing this request, noted that the section line easement crosses through and goes across some of the most steeply sloped areas of the parcel. Now, to build a road within that section line, it does cut through major drainage ways, and an alternate access to the Girdwood, the Crow Creek Road is being proposed with this plat that does provide circulation from Alyeska Highway via Hightower Road, and the proposed road actually follows rather than cuts across, in most cases, and works with the elevation of that exists within the petition site. So the alternate access does provide a potential for less disruption of a sensitive environment. And because there is an alternate circulation route that is complete from Alyeska to Crow Creek Road and back down to and Crow Creek Road intersects with Alyeska, that it would be unlikely that a road would be constructed within that section line easement.
May I ask one more follow-up, stupid question maybe? So are you saying that there's no other reason for the section line easement than a potential road as far as the municipality is concerned?
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, generally that's the case, that there are roads and pedestrian access points, but with the dedication of the right-of-way and the design standards within the 2109, there is a requirement to have a walkway, and also there is a public access. There are alternate public access points along Glacier Creek and the Iditarod Trail to address pedestrian access. So typically, the section line easements were created just to provide access to adjoining properties without determining whether a road is actually constructible or buildable within the section line. They're just paper platted easements. So there's an alternate easement that took a look at the elevations and the grade and the topography and the natural features and provided an alternate access.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, the public hearing is open, and could we hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, please? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Dave Hall of Allman Consultants. It's H-A-L-E. I'm representing Heritage Land Bank in this plot. This plat has a bit of a history to it. It began in 2007 with a preliminary plat application by another consultant. they went through the application process, had drainage plans, the whole thing, and then it got pulled for various reasons. So it's been an ongoing thing that's been reviewed previously over the last couple of years. This recent effort began just this summer with another application and a reconfiguration of the subdivision itself based on comments that we received a couple of years ago. This is being done in conjunction with a water line and a sewer project that AWW is working on currently. They've secured funding for the project, and it's a time-sensitive project. An OU representative is going to speak about that in a moment if she can. So today we've had quite a bit of comments and reviews, a lot of discussion about this plat and the location of it. And thanks to the planning department and Margaret's help, we worked through a lot of the issues. A couple of things that we see on here that we maybe take a little bit of issue with, and we maybe like to make some changes if we can. I spoke with Margaret before the meeting, and it seems like when we were discussing the additional public hearing, obviously Heritage Land Bank isn't excited to do another public hearing. We've done quite a bit of public hearings and comments and submittals over the last couple of years. They've expended a lot of time and money on this project. To go through another public hearing is, it seems excessive. I know that some of these documents would help everyone to see this project a little bit better. And Heritage Land Bank is willing to say, okay, we wouldn't mind submitting some of this. We'd rather not go through another public hearing now. And it sounds like maybe Margaret's got an idea about how to go about that. Maybe we can submit some of these items in 22 without the need for another public hearing and another round of comments. What we're trying to do is stay on track with the project and move it forward because of how long it's taken to date. A couple of things on 22. We have submitted a topography drawing that's part of the required submittals for the application. And the utility easements, working with the utility easements is going to be fairly time consuming. Again, we'd like to get these deliverables together and get them submitted within the next month or two so that we can move this process forward. If we get bogged down with this utility requirement, which is 22F, I have a feeling it's going to take the rest of the winter. And we do have a condition of approval previously that is, number one, resolving utility easements. Now, during that process, which would be after the public hearing and the meeting here, we would go forward then and we would speak to the utility companies and we would resolve whatever issues there are. And that would include figuring out if we need to bring it in through the front or the back. So with 22, in regard to that, I guess we don't feel that 22A or F should be conditions of approval. On the first page of the conditions, on number 5, there's a requirement for dedicating an easement for the Iditarod National Historic Trail. The Heritage Land Bank understands that they need to dedicate an easement in some form to protect that trail. It's already been built. It hasn't been located. It hasn't been surveyed, so nobody knows where the thing is. When you see it on the plat, there's from aerial photo, it's an interpretation of where it lays. So it may fall, 50 feet or 100 feet from where it's shown. What we need to do is we need to survey that. And then once we know the location of it, we need to see if it falls inside or outside of existing easements. There's a 200-foot public easement that is used for access. We're going to try to get that modified to 125 feet. If we can do that, then we can locate that trail. We can see how much of that trail already falls within a dedicated easement, and the rest of it, the Iditarod trail that falls outside of that corridor, would be protected by a trail easement. We would dedicate that portion. So we just thought that maybe we could reword that rather than dedicating an easement for the entire trail, resolving the need to cover the easement, with the applicable authorities. And besides that, I don't think that there's anything else that we had an issue with.
Are there You can stop.
So I'd like to, if I can, just reserve whatever time I have left for.
Okay, you have 4 minutes and 51 seconds reserved. Are there any questions for the petitioner? Ms. Stolpe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you say your name was Hales, Mr. Hales?
David Hale?
Hale.
Yes.
I didn't quite get what your objection is to conducting another public hearing. I mean, obviously, it will take time, and you seem anxious to get on with it. But on a project such as this, that seems to have quite a bit of community interest and attention, I'd just like a little more explanation about why you wouldn't want to have another public hearing.
Yes, ma'am. And it goes back to the history of this project. This has been in the limelight since 2007. There have been public hearings. There have been meetings in Girdwood with the directors down there. We've had a lot of input from the community themselves over the course of the last 2 years, and most recently again with the new application. We're having another public hearing where no doubt we'll hear some more from the public down there. We feel like we've heard it. There's not really a need for another public hearing as far as we're concerned. I mean, we can, all that would be said was a rehash of what's already been said over the last 2 years. So really, I think that 22 is really about these documents that need to be provided and reviewed by people and get comments back from that, but I don't think that a public hearing is really necessary.
And Madam Chair, I have one more question. Mr. Hale, I was interested in your comment about the Iditarod Trail that appears to have created substantial amount of response from the public down there, from the community
Right.
down there. It's an important part of their recreation and some history there as well, I think. I'm a little concerned about your response or your comments that that you don't know exactly where this trail is and you'll take care of it. It would seem to me that that would be something that would have been done before you came forward with this enormous packet of information. I mean, obviously there's been lots of people working pretty hard on this for a long time, as you stated. Why isn't the location of the trail more accurate?
No one surveyed it yet. Typically, what we see in the preliminary plat process doesn't include survey information. It's, we put these packets together with the best available information to put forth an idea for everyone to look at and give a preliminary commitment to. After we get that, we'll go out in the field and we'll actually survey the location of the monumentation for the boundaries, as well as the locations of pertinent items like this trail. And that trail is an important part of this subdivision as well. The subdivision is being built out in the middle of the woods, and it's going to be preserved in the woods, and the trails, bike trails, the paths, everything out there is a part of the appeal of the subdivision. The Heritage Land Bank wants to preserve that. So the reason it hasn't been located accurately is because that's not part of this phase in the development. It will be in the next phase.
But you are, if I may, Madam Chair, you are objecting to the wording on Department Recommendation Number 5, which you're wanting us to change the word dedicating. It currently reads, dedicating an easement for the Iditarod National Historic Trail on the Platte, the width to be resolved with non-motorized trails coordinator. You're requesting that we change that word or change the intent, as I read it, of number 5.
And it would only be resolving, just like resolving the utility easements, we'd be resolving the easement for the Iditarod. And I guess if we don't need to dedicate an easement the length of this trail, if it falls within existing easements, which it does, I know, in certain areas, at least it appears to, then we would dedicate as much of an easement as we need to preserve the trail, which would give us more room for the subdivision itself.
How do you, Madam Chair, how do you define needs to? Who, according to who? According to the non-motorized trails committee? I mean, it can't be just a subjective decisions. There's got to be an overriding authority here that says the trail will be this wide. Am I right or not?
It'll be based on, as Margaret said, the landowners and what's required for the trail. The width of it will be. What we're trying to do is we're trying to preserve the trail and place an easement over it, but also preserve enough space for the development of the subdivision. And in fact, some of the trail is scheduled to be relocated, if need be, to accommodate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Krieger, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Hale. Trying to follow this. I'm on 22 now. You've asked to have 22A and 22F removed, which would leave 22B through E, which would mean that you'd still have to have a revised preliminary plat and a public hearing review on those subsections of 22, correct?
We've also asked that the public hearing be omitted from this.
Okay, so what you'd like to have is, you'd like to have it read, submitting a revised copy of the preliminary plat, cross out the words for public hearing, that shows B, C, D, and E, but not A and F. Is that what you're getting to?
I believe it would be for public review and cross out hearing. Because, as I understand it, this does need to be reviewed by the public and everyone. It needs to be another application process. All we're asking is that we don't have to do another hearing.
What's the difference?
We don't have to come here. It would be an agenda item, but it wouldn't be subject to further comments, from the public. That's why we're here, is gathering that information tonight. I don't know why we'd do it again. We can submit all these documents. It can be reviewed again by the public. They can look at these. They can comment on them, but I don't know why we have to open it up to another public hearing.
I think I understand your position, and I'm not persuaded.
Okay.
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't understand why would you have the public review it and then not be able to comment on it. It doesn't seem to quite make any sense to me.
Well, the documents that they're asking us to produce are there for development. I think we've got the comments on whether or not people are comfortable with the subdivision itself and the placement of it. These are how are we going to develop it type documents, and people can review those and comment on them, but as we've heard from previous comments from the public, people are interested in the trails, and they're interested in the impact that the subdivision is going to have. None of these documents required in 22 are going to impact any of that.
Madam Chair. I guess then what you're asking for is public review and comment, but not public hearing.
Yes, sir.
And I don't think I'm persuaded with that either.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, you may.
Madam Chair, in response to that, basically the intent was to make sure that the individual lots could be developed in accordance with the applicable regulations. A non-public hearing review is quite common. It happens, the initial public hearing for the plat is being heard tonight, but a non-public hearing review that would come before the board and would be reviewed by the board and by reviewing agencies would be just another step and may not necessarily require a public hearing, because this is a more detailed look at the subdivision that normally the Platting Board does not get involved with. But in looking at all of the specific regulations within the Girdwood regs, which are not like land use regulations that currently exist for other zoning districts, it was thought to have a guiding document for future development of these lots. And so a public hearing review may not be necessary, but at least to have an approved document that would guide the development for the future, for the future homeowners. And that was really the intent behind that requirement. And I understand not showing the utilities, but the building footprints in relation to the topography is kind of important information, especially the areas that are to be retained as natural vegetation. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak.
Anyone else to be heard? Anybody else want to ask questions of the petitioner? Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Through the chair, in your preliminary drawings for this, have you already run all the utilities?
Yes, ma'am. We've placed the water line and the sewer line. We haven't placed the underground utilities for electric or telephone or gas.
And is there any storm drain proposed for the subdivision?
There are culverts for drainage.
But there's no main storm drain system for footing drains?
I don't believe so. It's natural.
How about cut and fill lines for the proposed roadway?
We've produced documents that show profiles for a proposed road alignment through the right-of-way corridor. And I believe, did we submit those, Margaret, to you?
Through the chair, Mr. Hale, I don't believe so, because I think that would be something that you would be submitting during the subdivision process, subdivision agreement process.
I'm sorry. We have developed a road corridor through there just to make sure that we could fit it within the 60-foot corridor that we're looking at.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hale? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11650 Holton Hills subdivision? Come forward. State your name for the record, please.
Good. I was wondering if you brought that. My name is Linda Barber Wiltsey. That's L-Y-N-D-A, and then Barber, B-A-R-B-E-R--W-I-L-T-S-E, and I'm the AWW project manager for this scope of project. And what I'd like to do is give a little bit of background.
Excuse me. So if you're testifying as part of the petitioner's testimony, we'll have to take your time out of the 4 minutes and 51 seconds that are left.
Okay.
Okay, hang on. She's got to adjust the clock here.
I have to talk fast.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
A very, very quick history. In 1991, AWW took ownership of the water in Girdwood, and then the water to the east side or the west side of Glacier Creek did not exist. Public water did not exist there. And the utility was asked to provide water to the west side of the creek, which included service to the school. And since in 2001 we hired R&M for design, and we've completed multiple phases of the project. Phase 1 brought water to the creek itself. Phase 2A took water across the creek and up to the school, got the school off of a well and onto public water, and we completed the well house in 2003. The remaining piece of effort that we need to do is to complete the loop, and if I can just step up here and hope that you can hear me. Here is where the school, this is where the water line is right now, and tie that into the transmission main that is on the east side of the creek, which will then complete a loop so we have a solid foundation to provide water to the west side of the creek. Right now, the fire station, we did an extension down to the fire station. It also is on the well. It's now in this system. So what we have is a long dead-end line that is basically served by a pipe that is attached to the pedestrian bridge across Glacier Creek. And for redundancy and reliability purposes, we need to complete the loop and have a complete system so that should something happen to the pipe in the future, we have service to the west side. We also have an EPA grant. We've had a few grants that have come through legislative process. The earliest one, I believe, is in around 1999, and we had 2 other appropriations. And we have about $1 million grant right now that's the final grant in this phasing. and it's due to expire in June of 2010. And so we've been working with Heritage Land Bank, who is the landowner, for securing the alignment of the Phase 2B, which is the final piece of the transmission line. And so we've been working with Heritage Land Bank through the Quail Creek Neighborhood Plan, which then produced the Holton Hills subdivision, which is what we're talking about now. So there's been a fairly extensive process to look at the land in the area north of the school and work within the guidelines that Heritage Land Bank works with to identify a purpose and need and a pathway by which we could, there could be a subdivision that is being built, as well as providing a corridor that the utility would put the water transmission main in order to complete the water transmission main loop that I described. And with that, I'd like to reserve time for questions.
You don't need to reserve time for questions.
This is my first one at the Platting Board.
Left for rebuttal altogether. Okay, so are there any questions of Ms. Barbara Walsey? Is that right?
What I would like to go on to say, I'm sorry, I did think of something else, is that as the questions came up about the cut and fill, we do have a 65% design. I'm looking forward for the design of this project with the confidence that we will have the land issues understood so that I can proceed. And in order for us to meet the objectives of making sure that we secure the funding for the project and complete the project, my intent is to submit our bid documents to the purchasing process at the Water and Wastewater Utility in November, with a bid opening set for mid-December, so that we can award the construction and actually be in construction starting in January and have the full 2010 year to complete the project and be complete before the grant that we have expires.
Are there any questions for Ms. Barbara Walsey? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in case S11650, Holton Hills subdivision? Please come forward and state your name.
My name is Sean Rolnick, Rollnick. I'm a Girdwood resident. I've been a continuous Girdwood resident for 9 years, and I've lived on Quail Creek Road for 4 years. I am up here more as a student of the process of what's happening. I do have interest in what happens to the land where I live. I understand that 2 years have gone into this process of designing what will happen to that land, the Heritage Land Bank's land, and there has been some public meetings in Girdwood, but I would like to say that I have a general sense that the feeling in Girdwood is that there are a lot of people that would still have something they would like to add to this process. Most of the time, I feel the general sense is that people of Girdwood don't always feel that they have much say in what happens with land that's owned by the municipality so much. But I do believe that if they felt that their voice could be heard and that it may have some effect on this process, that if there was another public hearing and it was advertised and the people of Girdwood would know about it and perhaps maybe even held in Girdwood, that you might get more public comment for the process. I would just like to suggest before, it sounds like that the Iditarod Trail has not really been looked at. I would suggest that anyone who, before any decisions are made, that everyone goes down there and actually walks on that trail and walks through that area before we decide how it should be developed. There's also another trail in that area that I don't even think is being looked at, called the Athabascan Trail, which I do believe falls within this tract, and that is an educational trail used by the school. It's well developed and is signed, and since the school did some work back on that Iditarod Trail a few years back, the trailhead has kind of been made far less accessible to the Iditarod Trail, which has cut its use, but several years back that trail was highly used. It is a trail that is, like they said, it's in the middle of the woods, like where they want to develop. They say that having a trail there is the appeal of having development there, but in reality, the appeal of the trail is that there is no development along that trail, as well as just in that area. So I just wanted to state my case and let you know that I think that another public hearing would probably serve this process and to take your time before you make hasty decisions as far as the development of this area.
Are there any questions for Mr. Rolnick? Ms. Moses?
In the interest of disclosure, I know this member of the public through another board I'm involved with, and he's my daughter's snowboarding coach. I don't think it will affect my decision, but wanted to make full disclosure.
Okay. Oh, your time's up.
Thank you.
No, stay here. Ms. Taylor?
Oh, I forgot to reserve my time.
Thank you. Through the chair, if you could please, on the aerial photograph in front of you, could you indicate roughly where the Athabascan Trail is?
Mr. Clark?
Well, it could be within the Heritage Land Bank property, and this you might not know. Would that all mean that it's part of this subdivision? I guess I would ask.
As far as I can tell, this subdivision is going to go to the edge of the Heritage Land Bank property. I could be wrong about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Mr. Krieger?
Mr. Rolnick, the current proposal before the board here is to approve this plat with a condition that says dedicating an easement for the trail, the Iditarod Trail, on the plat, the width to be resolved with the non-motorized trail coordinator. And the Heritage Land Bank wants that modified a little bit, but setting that aside, I think it's your position that, and I think I'm reading some emails that say that they would like to have the exact location of the trail determined. I think I'm getting that from the emails. Is that your position as well?
I certainly would like to have the exact position of the trail determined before this is approved to be platted.
Then my next question is, we typically don't get involved in the process of marking on a map where a trail goes. The board, as I understand it, typically defers those decisions to the agencies who are charged with doing that, like in this case, the non-motorized trail coordinator. So my question to you is, what's wrong with us doing that? Why don't we just tell the petitioner that they've got to meet with the non-motorized trail coordinator and dedicate that easement, and at the same time figure out how wide it's supposed to be?
I believe that the width of the trail is not really as valuable as the width of the space on the sides of the trail. If it's walking up along the dumpsters of the development, the trail loses its appeal overall, and instead of the idea is that the trail is there because it's a nice place to go for a walk. Like I said, I suggest that you walk the trail and see, and we can go out there and everyone could get together and we could see where this development's going to go and eye it up rather than look at a map. Might be, I don't know if that's possible, but...
Well, to interrupt you, I think that's what the non-motorized trail coordinator is supposed to do. And I guess the issue that I would be asking in your position is, will the public have any way of having input on what the non-motorized trail coordinator says ought to be the location of the trail? And my understanding is that, yes, the public does have input into that.
Right. So that has failed to be done by the trail coordinator?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it hasn't been done yet because the this would be a preliminary plat that says, okay, the plat is approved, but subject to the condition that you go figure out with this trail person where that trail is actually going to be. And it's my assumption when we approve those conditions that there is a public process which the public can say to the trail coordinator, we don't like that location. It should be somewhere else. That isn't really a question, is it? That's more of a statement. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Rolnick? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in case S11650 Holton Hills subdivision?
Good evening. My name is Soren Worth, S-O-R-E-N. Last name is W-U-E-R-T-H. And I've lived in Girdwood since 2000, except for 3 years that I was out. In 2002 and 2004, I served on the Girdwood Board of Supervisors. I was a road supervisor, as well as, of course, as a member of the Board of Supervisors, I was very intimate with some of the very, very preliminary things that were going on with this project. And I can tell you that when I came back to Girdwood 2 years ago, and I'm a property owner on Crow Creek Road, that I noticed that there's quite a number of people in the community who are very concerned about this proposed development. There are concerns about safety. There are concerns about, of course, the Iditarod Trail. There are concerns with the number of homes and the amount of traffic that would be increased on our roads. We already have a inadequate budget for the roads in Girdwood. And I came to the meeting tonight with the message of actually having more of a public process. And then I got here to find out that the petitioner is asking for a limited public process. To me, this is shocking, particularly in light of the fact that many people in Girdwood do feel disenfranchised from the process as it stands. And I can tell you that should this project move forward, that many, many people in Girdwood will be increasingly at odds with the municipality. And I think that's the kind of relationship that we want to move into right now. What's the rush? The Iditarod Trail it's not just an existing thing, but it's something that's been being expanded. Just this summer, the Forest Service put in a parking lot up along Crow Creek Road to provide access to a portion of the Iditarod Trail. The Iditarod Trail has been, since I was on the Board of Supervisors, a priority for the community of Girdwood and the Forest Service. There's regional groups that are planning it. The Iditarod section, the trail section that we're talking about, has been not surveyed because, of course, we don't have the money to conduct. We never had the money to conduct such a survey, but it has been platted GPS. It was our intention as early as 2002 to try to get this trail platted and surveyed. So that by saying that, well, this is something that we should have done, we have been trying in our community to do this.
You need to sum up.
And I'm sorry for taking extra time, but I can tell you that I think that we definitely need more of a public process, not less. And I think that the Iditarod Trail is very, very important for our community.
Are there any questions of Mr. Worth? Thank you. Oh, wait.
Madam Chair, just the notes that, through the chair, Mr. Worth, the notes that we have here say that the Girdwood Board of Supervisors has no comments on this preliminary plat as of this writing.
The Girdwood Board of Supervisors, I was just listening to the public process, the Heritage Land Bank, I forget the name of the delegate they sent, gave testimony, and the board of the Gordon John Gallup specifically said that there was concern about that the Iditarod Trail is not on the map. And there's also, I think, a reason for this is because the Iditarod Trail in places cuts very close to the edge of this Glacier Creek. If you walk up there, you notice that in some parts. And I suspect that part of the problem is that if they tried to push the development that far, there would be no place for the Iditarod Trail to go. It would have to go either down by Glacier Creek, because it's already, they're trying to get the maximum amount of land out of this, and that makes sense because they're trying to, they're trying to create the most revenue out of this available land. I don't think the Iditarod Trail is a priority for HLB, but it's certainly a priority for Goodwood, and it's certainly a priority for the Forest Service, and it's certainly a priority for a number of different agencies in that community.
Well, my question was, how come the Board of Supervisors didn't have comments?
Officially on the paper, frankly, I'm surprised at that too, because they made comments at the hearing in Goodwood, which is on the record in the minutes. However, as a former board member, I also know that it's a volunteer job, and for somebody to actually type comments up, unless it's somebody that's, even if it is somebody who's delegated to do that, it often never gets done.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Worth? Mr. Roll.
Sorry, I apologize. I missed just a minute, so maybe this is already covered. But I was wondering, do you have a specific recommendation then for the comments and the conditions for this plat as far as that trail?
As far as the Iditarod Trail, there is a Trails Committee in Goodwood, but keep in mind it is a volunteer body that a lot of our committees on GBOS, the Trails Committee has always been the hardest one to maintain. There was a guy who was really into it for a while and was always having meetings, but and to get that, nevertheless, I think it is important for somebody to take a step back and meet with people. Allison Raines, I noticed her comments are in here. Allison Raines, she doesn't say in these public comments, but she's works for the U.S. Forest Service as well, and has been one of the primary pushers. I don't think the Forest Service has made official comments, but I frankly think that this process is moving along so quickly that we just don't have time to take a breath and try to solve these things. I think that's really the question, is do you want to take some time and figure this out and do it right, or do you want to just rush it through and create a lot of consternation in the community?
Any other questions for Mr. Worth? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11650 Holton Hill subdivision? Anyone at all? Okay. Do they have rebuttal time? 2 minutes. Okay. Okay. Hang on.
Can I go again?
Yep. Okay.
I just wanted to point out real quick, if I could, that we've had a lot of time for comments and input. We've been doing this for 2 years. And I'd like to point out, too, here in the subdivision, the board has it in front of them, and this entire lot here, we have a huge tract called Proposed Tract C, Proposed Tract A. These are large open spaces that HLB is going to leave as open spaces, and that's where
Okay. You need. Excuse me. You need to speak into the mic. She needs to be able to record you.
I'm sorry. I just thought maybe the audience didn't have the benefit of having the plat in front of them. The HLB intends to leave large tracts of open land for those trails and for public access. And that's the intent of the subdivision, is to build around all of these natural features and still, maintain enough space for activity, winter and summer activity. And I would say that this process isn't moving too quickly. We've had a lot of input, a lot of meetings, a lot of good input that's driven this to this point, and I'm sure that we'll have more. And it's all good discussion, but the fact is the Heritage Land Bank is trying to develop responsibly and according to Title 2109 in Goodwood. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hale? Mr. Clark?
Yes, Mr. Hale, you've indicated that on number 5 here, you want this resolve the need for an easement through the plat. And I guess the reason for that was because whether or not it was on part of the plat. But it seems to me that what I see here is this easement that they've got outlined here, you've got outlined here, goes all the way through the plat. It doesn't go through all the lots, but it ranges all through the plat in proposed tract B, it looks like to me. So whether it's going to go through the lots or through tract B, it's still going to need to be dedicated through the plat. Whether the need is going to be there regardless. Am I reading this incorrectly?
The places where it wouldn't need to be an actual new dedication would be where it falls within the public easement. That is a dedicated easement, and it is specifically for public access. It's a public easement for access. So we have a trail that falls within that. It's already protected.
Madam Chair? But there's still going to be a need because it doesn't all fall within the public easement. Is that not correct?
There will be some need, yes.
So there will be need for dedication.
We will need to protect that trail.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hale?
Madam Chair.
Ms. Stolpe?
A couple of points. When you had public hearings, were they in Girdwood?
There were meetings, there wasn't a public meeting with the Platting Board down there. That's here. But there were meetings with, in Girdwood. I wasn't part of them. I wasn't a consultant at the time. 2 land use committee meetings and 2 board of supervisor meetings.
And what generally was the response of the public down there in these meetings?
Apparently we got a letter of no objection from the board of supervisors. And everything that I've read in the correspondence is that people see the need for this development, for the housing. They need more housing down there, and it needs to be developed responsibly. And the people that live in Girdwood are right. They do need to be concerned about development down there, and they need to watch it. But when development occurs, it needs to happen responsibly, but it does need to happen too. And you can't, restrict it to the point of not being able to develop. That's the point of Title 21.09, is to line it out for us how we can do that, and I think that we've been trying to follow that.
Madam Chair, if I may. We have a comment that arrived late. It was received on the 28th, and it was just at our places this evening. And it's from a gentleman, Brian Epley, and he identifies himself as a member of the Girdwood Board of Supervisors as the land use supervisor. And he says, and I quote, "I have reviewed both land use committee meeting minutes and Board of Supervisor meeting minutes, and it is clear that the consensus of the community is to protect the Iditarod National Historic Trail. The plat to be approved does not clearly protect the trail and needs to clearly protect the trail before being approved." So I would ask if you could respond to that.
We will protect that trail. The first way we need to do that is to locate it. We can't assign an easement arbitrarily to the trail because we won't be able to build anything within that easement. So the first step is, in the spring to go survey the thing, figure out exactly where it is and where it falls, and then where needed, cover it with an easement if it's not already covered by one. And then there will be no development within that corridor.
Could you indulge me one more question, please? In your comments that you made originally when you first came up to the microphone, you said that I understood what you said was that it was important to protect the trail, but it was also important to protect the need to develop this property. And I'm feeling, I just would like to make sure that that's what I heard you say.
The development of this property and the protection of this trail go hand in hand. I mean, that trail goes through a community. This development is going to be part of that community. It's going to be used heavily by the people that occupy the subdivision. You can't have one without the other. We're going to have to relocate portions of that trail to accommodate development so that people can live there, and we're going to need to protect the trail so that people can use it for years to come. One just won't exist without the other, so yes, we do need to make room for development, and we do need to make room for the trail.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Krieger?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hales. You're standing up tall. For what I gather happened is that there was a prior consultant who's not on the project anymore, and that consultant attended these meetings down in Girdwood with the community. And since that consultant's off the project, R&M has not met with people in the community.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what I'm hearing is that the community wants to meet with the people who are running the project and see if they can figure out, maybe they can't figure out where the trail is going to go. But I sense some legitimate concern from the Girdwoodians that this is being pushed, and maybe in part because they haven't had any interaction with the new consultant. Do you have any comments on that comment?
I would submit that the Heritage Land Bank is the developer down there. I'm trying to guide them through the planning process only. The Heritage Land Bank has been heavily involved in public meetings and correspondence with all parties involved. And while I facilitate that at times, my main job here as a consultant is to lead HLB through the planning process.
Thank you.
Mr. Roll.
Yes, through the chair. Could I ask a hypothetical question as far as this trail? Because I'm just trying to understand what's going to happen after this process and going forward. So, as it is now, and I understand that the trail, or that the plot here may not be accurate, and the trail might not be exactly in that position. But assuming that it is, it shows it going through a number of lots, and I'm curious what happens in the final condition if that becomes the case. Would that trail be relocated to the, basically relocated the minimum distance to get outside of the lots, or would it be relocated to some distance to provide a buffer, or how's that going to work?
The needed width of the easement will need to be determined, and the trail will be moved far enough away so that easement is outside of development. And that would include, the width would include a buffer. And when we're talking about when it goes through the subdivision, the plan is to move it outside further away, and to provide little spur trails going down to it, so that you've got to kind of walk through the woods to get to the main trail. But we would need to relocate it out of those. As it's shown right now, it does impact some of these lots, and it can't. It needs to be moved.
Ms. Taylor?
Thank you. Through the chair, have you had any contact with the non-motorized trails coordinator?
I have not.
Would you, I understand your position about not knowing exactly where the trail is and relocating it. Would you have any objection to rewording Condition 5 to resolve the need to dedicate an easement for the Iditarod Trail, the width be resolved with the non-motorized trails coordinator, and then adding a section to resolve the location of other existing trails within the boundary of the subdivision and dedicate trail easements as necessary?
The Iditarod National Historic Trail is the trail that's called out in the documents as needing some type of legal coverage, either an easement or a right-of-way. A lot of the other trails, like the one built by the school, the Athabascan, those weren't authorized trails. They're not historic trails. They just wouldn't build them. And it may be that they fall within the open space, and the HLB is willing to just leave them, and maybe even allow them to be maintained. They're nice trails. I have walked them, and they're super nice trails. And if they fall in the open space, it's public open space, and, you know, that protects it in its own right. Every trail doesn't need a legal easement, I don't believe.
As a follow-up, could we get confirmation from staff on open space and trails within open space? How have we treated this in the past?
Through the chair, Ms. Taylor, the only trails that we can ask easements for are those that are on an adopted plan. So the Athabascan Trail is not necessarily on an adopted plan. So it would be easements that were shown on the Iditarod Trails plan, and of course there has been a study for the Iditarod Trail. So of course there's every intention to provide an easement for that. But as for the Athabascan Trail, this is Girdwood open space. It is zoned GOS. So there will not be development, and I would assume that that trail can continue to be used under the land use regulations of the GOS and the Girdwood area plan.
Any other questions for Mr. Hale? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff? Ms. Stoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still formulating the question in my mind. Mr. Krieger asked an individual who spoke about the trails coordinator, and I think the question was, is it appropriate? Is it the way things work that we can make an assumption that the trails coordinator would work with whomever to establish this trail? And now that I'm asking that, you know, I guess the larger question is, where is that trail going to go? If it has to be moved in order to accommodate development. And Glacier Creek is right there.
The National Historic Iditarod Trail does extend from Girdwood through Indian and Crow Pass, and it's supposed to ultimately go to Eagle River, according to the the Girdwood Trail study. When the petitioner's representative was speaking, my understanding of the request was to resolve basically the dedication, meaning where is it going to be dedicated. So the first thing to do is to find out where the trail if the current trail exists, find out where it is on the proposed, and it impacts approximately, I think, 2 lots, and to relocate that portion. So relocation of the trail would be worked out with the non-motorized trails coordinator. Now, the Iditarod Trail Study did provide a recommendation on the width of the developed trail, 6 feet wide, 2-foot cleared shoulders. The amount of the dedication is to be resolved with the trails coordinator, because the study said that it would depend, the width of the easement would depend on the needs of the property owner as well as the needs for protecting the trail. So my understanding is that the municipal trails coordinator is a specialist within the municipality on trails. That is not to say she does not work with the Forest Service, or she would not work with other state or federal entities on a project that is basically interdepartmental and interagency, so to speak. So it would be a cooperative effort, and that was my understanding of what Mr. Hale is trying to say. Let us resolve where the dedication is going to be. And that's what, correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't hear resolving the need to dedicate. I heard resolving the dedication, the location and width to be resolved with the municipal non-motorized trails coordinator.
Mr. Clark.
Through the chair, I think we were pretty much, the way this reads to me, dedicating an easement for the National Historic Trail on the Platte, the widths to be resolved with the non-motorized trails coordinator. It sounds to me like with that verbiage there, the only thing that the non-motorized trails coordinator gets to weigh in on is how wide it's going to be, not where it's going to be and how it's going to be set where it is, and if that's going to be sufficient for the need. Am I incorrect in that?
Through the chair, the condition could be amended to resolving the dedication of an easement for the Iditarod Trail, the location and width to be resolved with the non-motorized trails coordinator. Would that clarify it for you?
Madam Chair, I'm just, my question is, wouldn't that be better verbiage for us to put in there? It certainly seems like it would be stronger and more to the point of what we're trying to get here.
Through the chair, Mr. Clark, absolutely, it would clarify it, certainly.
All right, and then I have another question here. It's off this subject, so we can get back to it, but it's something that's bugging me here. Under number 4, you have eliminating tracks D and E and dedicating the area for the proposed off-street parking as right-of-way. Do you actually mean to eliminate this great big proposed track D, or did you actually mean proposed track B?
Through the chair, Mr. Clark, thank you. It was B and it was track B and track D.
Okay.
Thank you for catching that.
Okay, before
Get off track there.
Before I forget, the public hearing is closed. Now, Mr. Krieger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for staff. I heard Mr. Hales asking for something differently than what you heard, I think. I think he was suggesting that because some of the trail may currently pass through some kind of protected area, that therefore it doesn't need to be part of a trails easement because it's already got some public use easement protection. And I thought that was his rationale for saying why it should be resolving the need to even have an easement to begin with in some places. And my question behind all that is, if I heard it right, isn't there a difference between a trail easement and some other public use easement?
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, it was resolving dedication of an easement for the historic trail, and you're right, he was mentioning that in locations where the trail is already protected by a public easement, then there may not be a need to have a specific trail easement within that public easement. Basically, a trail easement is provided across essentially private property to allow legal access for pedestrians to use a trail. The 200-foot public easement adjacent to Glacier Creek is just that, a public easement. It's for public purposes. So that would, in fact, provide legal access, continuous legal access for the trail if it falls within the boundaries of that 200-foot public easement.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Through the chair, on condition number 22 requiring the public hearing review, did I understand you correctly that that's a requirement of Title 21?
Through the chair, Ms. Taylor, no. It was recommended that there be a review of these items because of the requirements of Title 21. The Girdwood land use regulations are much more specific vis-a-vis an individual lot. The requirement to retain undisturbed vegetation, the requirement to have for the setbacks that differ depending on lot size, the fact that there is going to be access easements for access to the individual lots. Those access easements may determine that is the front lot. So your front lot boundary is here. Your building must be set back this far. So it was really a guidance. It's like a site plan, as the commission sometimes does a non-public hearing review of a site plan to look at the details. And basically, the approval by the Platting Board, it eliminates some of the questions that a future homeowner might have and guides them as to how they can develop the property and still maintain the intention of the Girdwood land use regulations.
As a follow-up, then, how would that work for us? If we approve this tonight, is it not really approved until they come back, or are they approved and they just can't record final plat until they come back?
Through the chair, Ms. Taylor, they have an approved preliminary plat. It's like any other condition, a drainage plan, an erosion sediment control plan, a subdivision agreement. They would have an approved preliminary plat, but this is just an additional condition that they would have to come forward. And the reason why it was done this way rather than combining all the requirements into one is the very tight deadline that AWW is up against to install that water line or lose all the funding, which is for the benefit of the entire Girdwood community to complete that loop. So that's why it's basically recommended as a two-step process to ensure that Girdwood gets that needed water line.
So then, worst case scenario, they could wait 4 years and 11 months before we saw this again? If we're approving tonight for 60 months?
That's true, but they wouldn't be able to record a final plat without it. So it would be their best interest to try to get that in as soon as possible, because they wouldn't have a recorded plat wherein lots can be sold, because it's a condition of the plat.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
On this issue about the setbacks, my understanding of the process the way it is now, they have to meet the requirements outlined in Title 21 anyway. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
But if we take this action here, to cast in stone something that might be a little bit easier to handle for future properties down the road, changing circumstances at that time, rather than us saying this is the way it's got to be at this particular time, it would seem to me. The way the Title 21 is set up now, there's a little bit more flexibility with the process that they have than us setting this in stone when this plat is approved. Is that not correct?
Through the chair, Mr. Clark, this will not be recorded on the plat. The setbacks, the bounding footprint, the area for retention, natural vegetation, it will not be on the recorded plat. It is just basically a way to determine that the lots can be developed and within meeting the Girdwood regulations. The only other suggestion I have is submitting a revised copy of the preliminary plat showing the following to the Planning Department for review and approval. But it's not going to be on the recorded plat, and so it wouldn't be cast in stone.
Well, Madam Chair,
Mr. Clark?
according to this, it says it's going to be on the plat. Submit a revised copy of the preliminary plat, that shows the required setbacks for each lot.
Through the chair, Mr. Clark, submitting a site plan based on the preliminary plat. All we want is the site plan to show this, that it can be done. That's what the intent of that is.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Krieger?
Sorry, through the chair. Can I get the department's reaction to a proposed revision to this paragraph 5? Because if we go ahead and start voting on something, we may not be able...
Through the chair, paragraph 5, you mean condition 5?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What would the department's reaction be if the language said dedicating an easement for the trail on the plat, the location and width to be resolved with the non-motorized trail coordinator and the Girdwood Board of Supervisors or its designated representative? The operative language being folding those folks into the process with the trail coordinator.
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, that's in essence requiring a second public hearing. There have been public hearings, and there is a study. There was a lengthy study on the Iditarod Trail, and I did quote from that study. The intent of that Iditarod study is on the top of page 15. It is the intent of the municipality of Anchorage, Heritage Land Bank, USDA Forest Service, the Alaska Department of Natural Resources to provide a continuous Girdwood Trail corridor located consistent with the recommendations of the route study. So, and excerpts from that Girdwood route study were included in the packet starting on page 151. So there's been a study of the route, of the Girdwood route study. The alignment of the trail basically, and the provision, the actual implementation of the trail, and the provision of the easement, as this trail study states, is
Well, can I ask another question while you're working that?
Well, basically the study said that the provision of the easement is up to the public agency, is up to the property owners through which the corridor is going to go.
Okay, thank you. A follow-up question? So I gathered that you said you didn't think that would be a good idea because you think it would require another public hearing, but I don't follow why adding a condition that requires the Girdwood Board of Supervisors or its representative to be in the room with the trail coordinator when they map out the location of this trail is the same as a public hearing. Can you correct me on that?
Madam Chair, if that question could be directed to the petitioner, that would be helpful.
I think the public hearing is closed, so.
You can question the petitioner.
Oh, can I ask the petitioner that question?
Sure.
Well, I think the question was, what's wrong with having the language say, coordinate with the Trails Coordinator and with the Girdwood Board of Supervisors or its representative? I mean, let me preface the question. There's nobody from the community of Girdwood who's here saying, go ahead and approve this. Everyone is saying, we haven't had enough public process. So our options are throw it back and not approve it with your language, which doesn't appear to involve the community, or try, as I'm trying to do, to get some built-in community participation, even though the preliminary plat has been approved. So my question after that long introduction is, what's wrong with having language that says you do this in conjunction with the Trails Coordinator and the Board of Supervisors?
I think that initially, as Margaret said, that the language says that it's up to the property owner to establish that width. It doesn't require any other input. I think that the HLB has worked with everyone and will continue, but if you put language in there that's more restrictive, I guess initially I would say that it's a bad idea. It's going to lead to more delays.
Why would that lead to more delays?
We're going to go back to the community and we're going to talk about this for the next year about the location and the width of that trail, and we're never going to come to an agreement.
Well, it seems to me the alternative is that you have an alienated community down there. At least you have people that feel like they've been left out of the process.
We have a requirement now to work with a non-motorized trail coordinator. I guess I would be reluctant to add a whole list of people that we need to coordinate with and work with to establish the width and location of this thing.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
I think I see a potential problem with that language in that it sounds to me like you're putting the Board of Supervisors in a position of being able to veto the project, basically, by adding them in there. I think one of the things that this process is set up for, and I would assume that this is what the non-motorized trails coordinator's job is to take the input from those folks and employ that in what they're thinking. And that's part of the process already. But if we add the Board of Supervisors, we add in a potential roadblock where this would never get through. And I don't think that's what we want to do.
If I may too, the Heritage Land Bank has submitted that perhaps the board can meet with what's her name? The Trails Coordinator. We can meet with them, have them all in the same room, and we can get their input then. So we leave the requirement the same, but get their input through a meeting. I think you're right. That's what's going to happen anyway. We're going to get their input.
Ms. Moses?
Not a question for the petitioner.
Okay. We're probably at this time, since the matter does rest with us and we are discussing it, we've gone from asking questions of staff to discussing the particulars. We should have a motion, a positive motion. So if somebody could make a motion, that would be great.
I rang in, I thought to make a motion, but looks like it says I've motioned. I haven't even made my motion yet, and I got a second. Now that is a powerful motion.
Mr. Krieger.
Okay, thank you. In the case of S11650-2, I move to vacate the 100-foot section line easement running north and south, common to sections 8 and 9, subject to recording a final plat within 60 months of obtaining approval of the State of Alaska Department of Natural Resources.
And Ms. Taylor seconds. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes, and we move on to the phase plan.
I'm trying to get to the screen where it says I can make a motion again.
Mr. Creek.
In the case of S11650-2, I move to approve the phase plan.
Ms. Stolpe seconds. Would you speak to your motion?
I think it makes sense to do it in 2 phases.
2?
Was it 5 phases? In phases, however many phases were anticipated. 5 phases. Thank you. I misspoke.
Okay. Any other discussions? Any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, the phase plan is approved, and now the plat. Did you have to punch a button? Oh, there we go.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, technical. Thank you. In the same case of S11650-2 Holton Hills subdivision, I move to approve the plat for 60 months subject to the following conditions, 1 through 3. Condition 4, eliminating tracks, change the letter D as in David to B as in baby. And with respect to 5, changing 5 to read, dedicating an easement for the Iditarod National Historic Trail on the plat, the location and width to be resolved with the non-motorized trail coordinator, comma, in conjunction with public input. Period. And then 6 through 22, no other changes.
Is there a second? Mr. Clark. Mr. Krieger, would you speak to your motion?
I wasn't persuaded that 22 should be changed. I don't know whether it was just semantics or not, but it sounded like there was a reason why the department drafted it that way. With respect to 5, I think Mr. Clark makes an excellent point that we don't want to require the petitioner to resolve something with anybody other than the non-motorized trail coordinator. On the other hand, I think as drafted, as amended, this will express the board's sentiment, at least the mover's sentiment, that the public down there ought to be involved in the location, if not in the location and the width of the trail, so that they feel comfortable with where it's going to be placed. That's why I would support the motion.
Any other discussion? Mr. Roll.
I just wanted to throw out something maybe for discussion in line with what Mr. Krieger was stating. But so we're talking about condition 5, and I think that the language there is generally good. My thought is maybe a friendly amendment, but to add a condition for showing the proposed final location of that trail under condition 22. That would require it to come back before us in a preliminary plat. We can see the final view, where that trail is going to be. Public can comment on it, and we can make a final approval at that point.
I would be amenable to a friendly amendment adding a language to that effect as 22G. We should probably work out the text a little bit more.
Yeah?
So that, could you make another run at the text? I'm sorry.
Sure. I jotted something down. So as 22G, I had jotted down because the 22 itself says submit a revised copy of the preliminary plat for public hearing review that shows, and then G would say the proposed final location of the Iditarod National Historic Trail.
Could I have a reading of Mr. Krieger's word changes on number 5? Please.
Let me see if I've got it right. He was recommending changing to read dedicating an easement for the Iditarod Historic Trail, the location and width to be determined with the non-motorized did I?
No, the only word, width to be resolved, I don't think I said determined. I didn't mean to say determined. I did resolved.
Oh, okay. Oh, to be resolved? I beg your pardon. With the non-motorized trail coordinator in conjunction with public input from the Board of Supervisors? No, not the Board of, just public input. Okay, that's what I have.
All right, and did you not, Mr. Krieger, you left in dedicating and not resolving?
Yes.
You left in dedicating?
Yes.
Okay? Okay. So we're all clear here? Any discussion? I got a whole list of people that say they want to talk. Ms. Taylor?
I hope I have a friendly amendment. On condition number 22, on the revised copy of the preliminary plat submittal, I'd like to add condition H to show the proposed cut and fill limits for all the internal roads. It's, I think, essential to see what they plan on clearing for those roads and how it's going to affect the vegetation and open space. And it sounds from what the ABU representative said, it sounds like they've got 65% on it already, so I don't think it's going to be a burden to the petitioner to add that information.
Mover and seconder?
Mover is okay with that?
Ms. Moses? Did you have
been so many amendments, but just to speak on the motion, I don't intend to support this motion as originally stated or with any of these amendments. I think that this board, first I'll go on record by saying for some reason we seem to have the impression of some of the members that there was an adequate opportunity for public input. I think more than 2 meetings in Girdwood, not to mention the time that's passed. Tonight, only 2 members of that community came to this meeting, no community council president. The Board of Supervisors, which is a volunteer position, granted, but is representative of the community, made a late comment and did not object, but just wanted us to make sure and give the trail consideration. This does that as written. I'm hesitant as a board to place burden or requirements above and beyond the code and regulation on a private, if you will, landowner. The verbiage, public input, where will that end? The addition of in conjunction with public input. Like I said, where does that end? So I guess I feel like for some reason some of the members of the board have this thought that the Girdwood community didn't have ample time to comment or react. And I am of the opinion that is quite the opposite. And to me, particularly a small community like Girdwood, which I personally spend quite a bit of time in, for 2 members of the public and no community council president or board of supervisors to show, maybe as a board member tells me where this does fall on the the scale of importance to the community and the lack of public comment in general, even if you go back to the original case. So I do not intend to support it with the changes, and to be honest, I'm unsure if at this point I make my friendly amendments or if we have to go back to a vote, so maybe Madam Chair or someone could guide me.
Okay, I think because there are objections to the changes in the amendments, no, that we're not all, I think we're just going to have to go with the motion. And as it's stated at this point, and if you disagree, you've had your say. So, and we'll see if that's going to sway anybody as we go forward. So, Mr. Krieger.
I was going to respond to Ms. Moses. Thank you for your comments. My thought is that the tweak on 5 is pretty de minimis, and I think that the idea of, in conjunction with public input, doesn't create an open-ended process. It signals to the trail coordinator that they ought to do, I think, what the Heritage Land Board has promised to do, which is to talk with the interested people down there when they figure out the location and width of this trail. So I don't think that's a burden on the landowner. And I don't think that I don't think there's an absence of comment by the community down there. I think the community is saying in several different ways that they are not quite ready to support this, and maybe it's because they don't understand the process of getting the location and width figured out. But I don't think that's I don't think it's going to burden the process by adding the language that indicates an intention that they will have some opportunity to comment to the trails coordinator. Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Madam Chairman, it appears to me that Ms. Moses has got some amendments she wants to attach to this motion, and we can't pass, if she has those, we can't vote on that. Her motion, her amendments won't take effect unless we vote on them and take action on them now.
Right.
So she needs to make those motions now so that we can, if we act on this, then we don't have that opportunity.
Ms. Stolpe?
Just in the matter of parliamentary procedure, it's been a long time since I've looked at Robert. Well, we don't go into Robert's rules, but it's been a long time since I've dealt with it. But I think if there is a motion on the floor and it's been seconded, that unless a friendly amendment is agreed to, that we need to vote on the motion on the floor.
She can amend the motion.
If she has a friendly amendment.
It doesn't have to be friendly. She can propose an amendment to the motion.
And then that is voted on and it supersedes the motion that's on the floor?
No, she's amending the motion on the floor. So if she wants the motion to say something different, she can make that motion. We can vote whether we think that that's
only with the approval of the maker of the motion.
No. Anyone can amend the motion. It doesn't, in fact, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. Strictly speaking, we should, everyone who wants to make a change needs to make it as a motion, it needs to get seconded, and it needs to be voted on.
We've got a motion that's been seconded, and I don't think you can put another motion.
With attached friendly amendments. But what I'm saying is, there is no procedure for a friendly amendment. We should, in reality, be, anytime there's a change, it should be amendment, change, motion, second, vote. In the past, though, we have accepted friendly amendments.
Point of
That
order.
does not preclude Ms. Moses from making an amendment. So, would you like to make an amendment?
I'll withdraw. I was just going to get to, if there's a motion that we should hear it. That's what Mr. Clark is saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
That's why, Madam Chair, just to clarify, so, yes, I would like to proceed with the motion. Is the proper way to do that at this time to move
Yes.
or to amend?
Move for an amendment. I would like to amend.
So,
Okay. Why didn't that work? There I am. There's a problem with my system. Hold on 1 second. It's not showing up. I need to record this. That's what's wrong. Okay. Now we'll add another motion. And sorry about that. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't want to lose that motion.
Should. Yeah.
thank you. In the case S-11650-2, Holton Hills subdivision, Block 1, lots 1 through 18, Block 2, lots 1 through 8, Block 3, lots 1 through 14, and tracks 1E, B1, and 9-A1. I move to amend the motion for approval of the plat for 60 months, subject to the following conditions and changes to the original motion, or amendments. I don't really know how to word that, but approval of the plat for 60 months, subject to conditions 1 through 22F with the following changes. Condition number 4, changing D as in dog to B as in boy. Condition 5, changing the wording to say dedication of an easement for the Iditarod National Historical Trail on the plat, the location and width to be resolved with the non-motorized trails coordinator, period. Condition 22 with the following changes: submitting a revised copy of the preliminary plat for public hearing and review, period, with the following continued changes: removing condition 22F, and that's it.
Is there a second? No. Means we get to vote. Okay. Second by Ms. Taylor. Ms. Moses, would you speak to your motion, please?
I intend to support my motion without going into a long spiel, basically based on my previous comments in reaction to the original motion and amendments.
Is there objection to the motion? Okay, then we need to
Yes.
vote on.
And can I ask one clarification?
Sure.
As opposed to amendment, this is actually what she is proposing as a substitute motion to replace the existing motion on the floor. Is that not correct?
One way or the other, it's
It'll say,
Yeah.
yeah. I just, okay, record and start voting. And this is on the substitute motion.
Could you clarify what a yes and a no vote means?
A yes vote accepts her substitute amendment, and a no vote rejects her substitute amendment.
Okay.
Okay, so that motion did not pass, And we're back to the original motion, which has the wording as friendly amended by, let's see, the motion was Mr. Krieger's motion, seconded by Mr. Clark. A couple of clarifications from Mr. Roll.
Ms. Taylor.
Oh, and Ms. Taylor. So does anyone feel the need to have it reread? No. Okay. Is there any objection to the motion? Okay, so then we need to vote again.
Madam Chair, some clarification before we vote. Is the motion we're voting on the original motion by Mr. Krieger with the friendly amendment of Mr. Roll
And Ms. Taylor.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, that motion passes and the plat is approved for 60 months. Okay, so that comes to the end of the public hearing portion of the agenda. Any persons to be heard? Reports? Board member comments? All righty then. Oh, Joe. Oh, okay. Sorry. Right. We're adjourned. Yeah, probably. I'll revise that.